Welcome to Calvary Temple Church, here in the heart of downtown Winnipeg. Calvary Temple is people of all generations and all nations. Stay tuned for a message of hope and encouragement.
This morning we take another look at the amazing book of Ruth. We certainly have talked about God's grace in this book. We've talked about God's love in this book. We've talked about God taking care of these widows. We've had an amazing time talking about grief, and last week Pastor Scher talked about grace. And today we want to look at chapter 3. Now in chapter 3, the two widows that made the trek back to the house of bread, back to Bethlehem, these two are looking for a more long-term solution to their food supply and their housing needs. And what we have is a human proposal. These women have a proposal to make to a man named Boaz. Now, Naomi, Ruth, and Boaz will all get in the act today in our little message that we're going to share. And what we'll learn is that God, in His wisdom, has chosen to include human beings in these human proposals. We see earthly human involvement in a marriage possibility. It's a good question. It's normal to desire companionship. It's normal to desire marriage. We'll learn today that God is in our hopes and in our prayers and in our plans, and even Naomi's scheming and her planning and her praying and her hoping. God's not hands off. God is not some kind of austere God that hangs around in the cosmos and says, you work it out. No, He allows us to work, He allows us to plan, and He allows us to be involved in His life and ministry. Well, let's begin with this line. The woman proposes Naomi's prayer and plan. I want you to think a bit for a moment about how you involve yourself in prayer. Now, I know for me, my prayers are often like Naomi's. In the spur of the moment, during the day, I call them bullet prayers. They're short, they're brief. They might even be in the category of musing or thinking or hoping or in fact, they sound a bit like this. Now, some of you know that we have adult children, and sometimes adult children get in some challenging situations. Have you ever noticed that? And right now, I kind of bullet prayed my way through a week of my son having midterm exams. Lord, be with Drew, and especially when he has multiple choice exams. He doesn't like multiple choice exams. Dad, pray for me today. That multiple choice, they're trying to trick you, Dad. They try to trick you. And so I've been offering up bullet prayers for him. And then our daughter going through the loss of her fiance and the grief that she's feeling. And so I'm praying for her. Lord, strengthen her and help her. And then sometimes a prayer almost sounds like a hope. It says, oh, I hope that car keeps running. Lord, keep that car running that my daughter drives. Yes, that'd be good, Lord. And then sometimes it's almost on the humorous side. Now, Lord, don't let that little boy drive her crazy. Help her, Lord, help her to keep together. And so sometimes prayers sound a bit like that. Well, I even pray, Lord, harness his energy and help him to grow up and use that energy to your glory, Lord. Well, sometimes our prayers are often our hopes. May the Lord grant that each of you, this is back 2 chapters previous, this is Naomi, may the Lord grant that each of you will find rest in the home of another husband, In other words, Lord, I would really prefer if these two daughter-in-laws of mine would find some husbands and have a secure home, and Lord, I hope you've heard me. Well, that was part of what she did. She prayed, she talked about it, she wished it, she desired it. It was part of her. And sometimes a tossed-off prayer like that becomes quite significant because God hears every word. In fact, we need to be careful what we utter because sometimes we get snared by the words of our mouth. Sometimes we're mumbling negative things and cutting across God's will and plan and saying things that we shouldn't say. I like Psalm 19:14. I say it quite often. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable to you, Lord. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart. Well, our prayers sometimes are our hopes and our dreams, and watch Naomi now. Get on your knees and pray. Get on your feet and work. It's not one or the other, but it's both. There's a time to pray, there's a time to wish, there's a time to hope, there's a time to dream, and then there's a time to do. And this little plan that she comes up with is quite amazing. This is the other side of the coin. Ruth had worked the early harvest. We talked about that, the barley harvest. Then she went to the next field and worked the next harvest. And she had done her best to bring food to them day after day. She wasn't lazy, but they knew that winter was coming. Listen in on the conversation between these two women, the older woman, Naomi, and the younger woman, Ruth. One day, Ruth's mother-in-law, Naomi, said to her, "My daughter, I must find a home for you where you will be provided for. Now Boaz, with whose women you have worked, you know him, you saw him in the field. He's a relative of ours. Tonight he'll be winnowing barley on the threshing floor." Now how many notice the wheels turning in the mother-in-law's head? She is getting a plan together. She's done enough praying and enough wishing and enough hoping. She's going to put a little action to it. Well, she knew that the harvest was wrapping up. And she knew in those last couple days as the harvest wraps up, they have a party on the barn floor. And she knew that he would be staying there that night. And it would be a time of celebration. And she knew Boaz was the closest kinsman to them. And so she lived by the motto, do your best and leave God the rest. And she was about to do her best. She wasn't going to just wait for God. And that's pretty good advice, because the truth is God can do anything he wants, but he wants to include us. He wants our hearts. He wants our dreams. He wants our visions. He wants our plans. He wants us to be involved in the ministry that God has called us to and the needs and the problems in our lives. So it's a little hard to know what's coming from Naomi and what's coming from God. How many are glad that God can blend it, work it together? He can take our part and his part, and when it's all done, we look back and we wonder, why did I do that? Why did I feel prompted to do that? Why did God give me the courage? That isn't me. I wouldn't have done that normally. And we look back and say, well, God must have been in that. But Naomi and God are partners in this together. So listen to this. I'm glad there are some young people here today to hear this. This is quite the advice. Wash. That's good advice. I say that to children and young people. It's important to wash, put on perfume, and get dressed in your best clothes. You see, this daughter-in-law had been in her mourning clothes. She is a widow. She was sad. She was a sad sack. And the mother-in-law says, time to put off those clothes and dress up and get some perfume on and go down to the threshing floor, but don't let him know you are there until he has finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, make a mental note of it. where he is lying, and then later go back and uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do. Now, scholars tell me that it's a little uncertain as to know what was really meant in this passage. But I can tell you two things I know for sure. It's bold and it's provocative. And there's no way to get around it. I kind of like the Bible for that. This is real stuff. This is a plan. We're going to get some action here. We're going to get involved in getting you a husband here. And this mother-in-law has a plan. So, now, this Naomi lady, I don't know this for certain, but she may have been born at night, but it wasn't last night. I mean, she is a sharp cookie. And she understands the way God made us, male and female. And I've got news for you, friends. It's still the same today. We are male and female. And that has a chemistry to it. And she understood that. And she believed in prayer, but she also believed in action. Now, I dated a young lady when I was about 14 or 15. Well, I wouldn't call it dating. There were all kinds of us. We were kind of all together. And every time I went to their cabin at Brayside Camp, the father made me very nervous. Do you know what he would say? Faint heart never won fair lady. I say, what are you trying to do, old man? Faint heart never won fair. I get out of there, man. I don't want anything to do with that. Well, sometimes action is necessary. I love the words of a former slave who became a social reformer, an orator, a leader in the abolition movement. His name was Frederick Douglass. He said, I prayed for 20 years, but received no answer until I prayed with my legs and got up and ran away. Wow. How many know that's in the book of Ruth? She wasn't just going to sit around. She was going to do something. She had hoped and prayed, and then she went to work and did action. The other woman proposes. Ruth acts. I will do whatever you say. This is the younger woman. Now Ruth answered, so she went down to the threshing floor and did everything her mother-in-law told her to do. Now, just hold on for a moment. You'll find out she does more than she was told to do. She was told to wait and only do what Boaz tells her to do. But that isn't what happened, you will notice. Now, it's one thing for the mother-in-law, the older lady, to come up with a scheme. But Ruth, the Moabite, keep in mind, she is not of the house of bread. She is a foreigner, and she's a widow. There's all kinds of things against her. You might say she was racially challenged. She was in a situation where she was not accepted. And here she is taking advice from her mother-in-law and actually acting it out. I'll do whatever you say. So she went down to the threshing floor and she did everything. Now, my question is she a robot? Is she just passive? Does she have her heart in this? Is she really involved? Does she really want to do this, or is she just acting it out? Well, the question is Ruth really passive, or is there a case for collusion? Is she in on this scheme? Does she really have her heart in it? Well, I say she has her heart in it, my friends. I'm telling you, she gets involved. She believes. She is not just hoping and praying. She is acting. Watch this. In the middle of the night, something startled the man. He turned, and there was a woman lying at his feet. Who are you? He asked. I am your servant Ruth, she said. Now watch this. Spread the corner of your garment over me since you are a guardian redeemer of our family. Now, that's not exactly what she was told to do. She takes it a step further. Boaz knew exactly what she meant by that act. She actually proposes to Boaz, who himself is a fairly elderly gentleman. She proposes to him. Now, this is daring stuff. Remember, she's a foreigner. She's a woman. And here she is taking hold of her life, and after hoping and praying and getting advice from her mother-in-law, she actually walks right in there and she said, "You are going to marry me." Wow. I'm going for it. Maybe she had heard the old fellow at Brayside Camp say, "Faint heart never won fair man." I don't know. But anyway, she took it into her own hands and she went after it. Now, you need to know there was no guarantee as to how Boaz would react. I'm sure in that culture, this woman could have lost her life. But she was desperate. She was putting her expectations. Now, she knew him to be a nice man. She had met him in the field. He had been generous to her. He had given her double the grain that others got. But it was all platonic. It was friendship. And so when she did this, she was risking. What if he rejected her? What if he said, "That's the craziest idea I've ever heard. Away with you, woman"? Well, we have Naomi's proposal. She comes up with the scheme, and then we have Ruth's proposal, which is action, and she carries it out. Boy, talk about a brave proposal. In the middle of the night with all these men sleeping all around her, and she's in there talking to this fellow about marriage. When you get around with people, do they ever say to you, "Tell me how you got married, tell me how you met, tell me how you got engaged, tell me," have you ever had that? I saw this yesterday. I don't know who Dave Morin is, but this Brittany Bonnet, she works for Google, and he wanted to marry her, so he flies her to this island, and he already has the words written in the sand, and she's the pilot of the plane, and it says, "B, will you marry me?" B is for Brittany. "B, will you marry me?" And she's looking down out of the plane, and she sees the sand, and she turns to him and says, "Yes." Now, that's pretty unique, isn't it? Now, this other proposal I heard of is a fellow who was a bit of a techie, and his name was Devin. He was also known as Ranger X-52. He built a robot, and the robot opened its chest, and an engagement ring came out on a hand. And the robot asked if his girlfriend would marry him. Wow, that's kind of neat. The bottom line, Naomi prayed and planned and hoped, and Ruth proposed. She did something about it. She got up and did something. But there's another player here too, and his name is Boaz. Now, Boaz's proposal has a little different plan to it. Now, it's hard to know what the ladies were expecting. What were they expecting? It's hard to know. Perfume, nice clothes, enticement. Who knows? But were they expecting a marriage immediately? Were they expecting? What were they expecting? Well, I am so blessed by Boaz's response. Look at this with me. "The Lord bless you, my daughter. This kindness is greater than that which you showed earlier." She's likely referring to the fact that he was very blessed by the fact that this Moabite woman cared about her Jewish mother-in-law. And he complimented her. And he said, Boy, I'm so blessed that you're out here working, and I'm so encouraged that you love your mother-in-law, and I'm here to bless you and help you. But then notice what this older gentleman says. You have not run after younger men, whether rich or poor. And now, my daughter, don't be afraid. I will do for you all that you ask. Whew. Wow. Wow. But he says, all the people of my town know that you are a woman of noble character. Wow. You're honorable. In fact, if we had time today, we would see that he told her, now, go and lay back down, but get out of here before light. When all these men start to wake up, I don't want you here. I have a reputation. I want to be honorable. I want you to be honorable. I want to have your reputation in place. Wow. Noble character. She was a Moabite woman. How many are thankful it's not where you come from, it's how you've been transformed? Hallelujah. I'm thankful that we get to do it again, that we get to start over, that we get to change the reputation that we once had. We can be called something that once we would not have been and now we are. Boy, that's the gospel. Thank God for that. So Boaz sees beyond the racial divide. He sees the heart of the woman. He sees her noble character. I'm so thankful for that. Stay here for the night, and in the morning, if he wants to do his duty as he talks about the other guardian redeemer. Although it is true, I am the guardian redeemer, if there's another one who's more closely related than I am. Stay here for the night, and in the morning, if he wants to do his duty as your guardian redeemer, good. Let him redeem you. But if he is not willing, as surely as the Lord lives, I will do it. Lie here until morning. Well, how do we describe Boaz? Well, the first thing I want to say is Boaz is stunned. He is absolutely stunned. Why is this young woman taking an interest in the likes of me? He just can't believe it. He didn't see it coming. He had no idea that this woman would have any interest in him. He is stunned for sure. But I also see in what he says that he's pleased. It's more than he could have dreamed. This young woman wanted him. This young woman wanted him to be her husband. He is totally amazed, totally flabbergasted. He can't believe it. He's stunned, he's pleased, and most importantly, he's righteous. There's someone with a prior claim on you that's a closer relative. He does not take advantage of her. And I think in that moment, in the dark, in that environment, that he could have, but he did not. He does not rush what God may be up to. He said, there is a step we need to take, and if it doesn't happen, then I'm willing, but I will let God decide. I want to pause for a moment and say this. There's always a right way and a wrong way to go about relationships when you're one of God's children. There's always a right way and a wrong way. He was concerned about his reputation, her reputation. He did not act in the moment. He got the intimacy piece in the right order. I'm so thankful that regardless of our past, we can always start over. In the house of bread, in Bethlehem, in the place where God provides, He provides forgiveness and cleansing, and He gives us opportunity to start over. It's one of the great joys in my life, and whether it's today's world where people meet each other in Christian chat rooms on the internet, or whether they meet each other at church or wherever, It's possible for people to rebuild their lives and put Jesus first and live out their lives of faith. And I enjoy it so much. So what have we learned in this passage today? Well, man proposes, God disposes. Have you ever heard those words before? You may have. The most prolific devotional writer ever wrote them. His name was Thomas A. Kempis. And he died in 1471. And in the context of this little passage, the resolution of the just depend rather on the grace of God than on their own wisdom, and in Him they always put their trust. Whatever they take in hand, for man proposes, but God makes it happen. God disposes. Neither is the way of man's in his own hands, but it's in the hand of the Lord. So Naomi says this, wait, my daughter, until you find out what happens. For the man will not rest until the matter is settled today. So she says, we had our plan. We lived out our plan. We did our part. Now, Ruth, take it easy. We'll know by the end of the day whether it worked. Just relax. She's basically saying, we gave it our best shot, and we're dependent on God. We can't do any more. We've done our part. So God fulfills His purposes through and in spite of our hopes and our prayers and our plans. God fulfills what He needs to fulfill as we do our best and then say, hands off, I've done all I can do. God, whatever you want to do, you do it. Oh, the Proverbs 16:9, we can make our plans, but the Lord determines our steps. Proverbs 19:21, you can make many plans, but the Lord's purpose will prevail. Miriam and I were 18 and 19 when we got engaged. We turned our birthday the following day and became 19 and 20. And I want you to know, as we look back, and we talk about this often, I'm so glad God had a bigger plan. We didn't have a clue what we were doing, but God did. Hallelujah! God did. And I want to encourage you today to be like Ruth and Naomi. Pray, hope, think, plan, and do. And God will be with you. Amen? Amen.
Thank you for watching the broadcast. An audio recording of today's message is available simply for the asking. Write, email, or call our toll-free number and request it by the CD offer shown on the screen. Our program is viewer-supported. It is people like you who help pay for the airtime. Thank you for your continued giving. We look forward to hearing from you. Please join us again next week for another episode of Calvary Temple Church. God bless you.